Laura,
Okay.
it is all yours, and we are good.
Thank you. Okay, just one quick second while I get my technology going here. Okay, there we go. Okay, welcome everybody to the September 28th school board meeting. I'll call the meeting to order, and we'll ask that those of you who are online would mute yourself, and please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. So this evening, we have first on our agenda is the consent agenda, which consists of the minutes from the August 24th regular meeting and the September 14th regular meeting, vouchers and payroll, personnel report, surplus report, contracts, field trips, policy updates, enrollment, and financial report. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Before we motion that, could I request that we pull out the controversial issues guest speaker policy? I think that warrants further discussion.
Certainly.
I also have a question. I didn't see the September 14th minutes. Is that correct? Were they, I mean, they're listed as being for approval, but I didn't see the actual minutes on there. I just refreshed the page and it didn't come up.
Gotcha. Okay, so we will pull the minutes from the 14th meeting and pull, what number was that policy, Julie?
It's policy 2331.
Okay, and 9:14 minutes. Okay, is there a motion to approve the amended consent agenda?
So moved.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? And this will be a roll call vote since we are all online tonight. So Martin?
Aye.
Maria?
Aye.
Julie?
Aye.
Michelle?
Aye.
And Laura is an aye as well. And so that motion passes. Okay, so now shall we take the individual items? Well, just the one item. I guess we'll be bringing back the minutes from the 9:14 meeting to the next meeting. Is there a motion regarding policy number 2331?
I would like to further discuss revisions to the policy based on what we received yesterday in terms of option 1 and 2. I still am concerned that the language would foreseeably conflicts with our previously adopted policy. I don't think we should be adopting a policy where staff are encouraged to have conversations that would foreseeably conflict with or would foreseeably result in substantial disruptions. But I thought some of the options that we were presented earlier are fine.
Okay, so it's my understanding from the last meeting that we were discussing a difference between the impacts of the word could and would, and it's not highlighted in a different color here, so I can't remember what line that was in exactly. I know that was reviewed by legal counsel, and I believe the whole board saw that he was comfortable still sticking with the word would. Was there?
Furthermore, he thought could was a less precise word.
Correct. Was
But
there,
then he
another-
also made some suggestions that were issues for which a substantial disruption to the operation of the district or school is reasonably foreseeable, or that present a real risk of causing a substantial disruption to the operation of the district or the school. I would propose that we include the language issues for which a substantial disruption to the operation of the district is reasonably foreseeable. Again, it's, you know, if every lawyer agreed, we wouldn't have judges. So my concern is still in the would foreseeably cause. I think that means that we know it's going to cause a substantial disruption. And I don't think that's the precedence we want to set. So I like this language that is issues for which a substantial disruption to the operation of the district is reasonably foreseeable. It doesn't mean that we know necessarily it's going to cause a disruption. And that's why I prefer that language.
I also am very comfortable with the reasonably foreseeable language. I felt that and would were of the alternatives we were shown were both acceptable to me. Actually, if anything, I would have a tiny, tiny preference for reasonably foreseeable.
okay. So is this an amendment to what is currently before us?
That would be an amendment, correct?
And so both Martin and Julia are agreeing to the same language based on the email from legal counsel that we received on the 27th, which was yesterday.
That's correct.
Okay. Would someone like to make a motion to that effect?
Can I ask a technical question? Since we don't actually see those words in the public meeting, do we need to actually see it displayed in order to have an emotion? And
You don't need to. You would have to read it into the motion as to how you want it read. So you would read in, if option one is it, you would read that in motion that we would.
As long as the
make that
ultimate policy, yeah, keep going.
Yeah,
Yeah, as long as the ultimate policy is adopted with that language, then it's consistent with our board action.
Yeah, but a read in, Martin.
I will read it in, and I'm prepared to propose the motion. And the sentence would become, teachers should also exercise special care in how they present controversial issues to students, which are, and at that point, that's the same language between both versions, issues for which a substantial disruption to the operation of the district or school is reasonably foreseeable. That is the new language. And then we go back to the same language, such as by generating significant tension between and among teachers and parents. That's the language that I read from the legal counsel. And I'm prepared to propose a motion that that be incorporated and approved.
May I suggest that that we actually have this in written documentation in front of us, because I really don't like voting on something that we're saying, oh, we should add this, but I would like to read the document in its entirety and be sure that legal counsel is okay with that. So I would suggest that we pursue that written format and have legal counsel's approval and then bring it back at the next meeting.
Okay.
So I'm
So
not making a motion.
Martin made a motion and we
I
didn't.
will be prepared to withdraw that motion, because the reason I asked the technical question, pardon me for the noise in the background, it's going in a second, was my question of it being visible to everybody. And that's what I called a technical question. So the words that I read, I believe, come verbatim out of the legal memo. But to give everybody a full chance to look at it and digest it, I would be very willing to withdraw that motion.
Okay, so the motion is withdrawn. And Michelle has proposed that we would see the new motion or the amended motion at the next meeting. And is there any time component to this?
No time component to it.
That's a very good and important question.
Okay,
But just so everyone knows, we're the time component is you're staying with the current policy as it currently is written. That's all that's in place right now is the current policy.
Right, and school is in session, so we will be changing a policy midstream. I mean, we would have been doing that today anyway, so. Okay, so we will, unless there's some objection from any other board member, we'll be seeing that amended policy at the next meeting along with the minutes from that other meeting. Okay, so going back up to the agenda. Our next item on the agenda is citizen comment. And this is the time for those in the public who would like to address the board to be able to do that. I assume there are folks that have signed up to do that tonight. Ron, how many speakers do we have?
Yeah, we have 4 tonight. And so
Okay.
I'll read their names and we'll ask them, I'll put them into the meeting. They'll turn the camera on and the microphone and introduce themselves and have
Okay.
their 3 minutes. So first one
Okay.
tonight.
So hold
in
on just one
attendance.
sec.
Oh.
Hold on just one sec, please. Thank you. So everybody, each person is going to have 3 minutes. And there is a timer in the window from Kim White. And so we want to allow everybody their full allotted time. And I do allow a little bit grace if you're in the middle of a thought, but I will cut you off politely so once you reach the end of your 3 minutes. So there is another piece of a statement that we had today, and I'm going to read part of that. The board as a whole should have the final decision in determining the appropriateness of all, well, I'm not going to read that part. So interpretation services will be provided for individuals whose native language is Spanish, and the complete meeting will be translated into Spanish and then provided with a board meeting summary later in the week. The administration, just so everybody knows, has discontinued the service of having the board recording secretary read an individual's public comment, which is not required per board policy. Public comment is open to any community member who would like to speak in person or virtually during the public comment portion of the meeting. Per policies, individuals with disabilities who may need a modification to participate in the meeting should contact the superintendent's office no later than 3 days before the meeting so that arrangements for the modification can be made. Community members who cannot participate due to scheduling conflicts may submit an email to the board of directors, and our emails are on our web page. It's an easy just link to click. So we are very open to receiving public comment, and there are a number of venues to do that. Anybody can always email us. You can contact us individually or as a whole, but reading written comments into the board meeting was not something that was standard. We did that as a courtesy during a time of COVID, but we don't want to make the impression that that's a regular service that we would continue to provide. So that's what I have to say about that. And now, Ron, please tell us who our first speaker is.
It is Eric Nordling, but I've tried to bring him into the meeting, and Eric, you need to accept the invitation to join the meeting as a panelist so you can be on camera and microphone. And we'll give you a little bit of time here, and then I'll go to the next one if you're having trouble, Eric, and you can chat with me, and we'll bring in the next one and we'll come back to you if you're having some difficulties. So I've tried that a couple times with him. So I'll move on to Johnny Houston, who I will bring in now. And here comes Johnny to do his comment.
Hello?
Hello, Johnny, do you have a camera? We would love to see you. Please begin whenever you're ready. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, when does the timer start?
Anytime you start your statement.
Okay, give me 1 second. Are you already started? Okay.
Go ahead.
This was somebody that was at the last meeting. He asked me to read it. He couldn't be here, so. Can you start that over, please? Okay, thank you. On 8/24, I attended my first Wenatchee School Board meeting. Yes, the very meeting that has vilified concerned parents by the Wenatchee world, several local pastors, and people on social media. Parents showing up to voice their opinions in contrast to the opinion of the school board is their right. Asking parents to put on masks when the reason they attended was to protest the mask wearing was a provoking and ignorant move by out-of-touch board members, excluding one of you. That being said, I wore my mask. I was appalled how often the school board broke the law with no one calling them out on it. Only one board member even considered standing with the parents. And the job of the school board is to represent the community, not the teachers. So let's look at the issues. OPMA, which is the Open Public Meetings Act, RCW 42.30.060 states any action taken at a meeting held in violation of the OPMA is null and void. The Wenatchee School Board requires you to register if you wish to attend a meeting in person or on Zoom. This request is published on your website. RCW 42.30.040 states a member of the public shall not be required to register as a requirement to attend a meeting. Register to talk, yes. Attend, no. RCW 42.30.30 states all meetings shall be open to the public. RCW 42.30.080 states a special meeting may be called at any time, presiding officer of a governing body of a public agency or by a majority of the members of the governing body by delivering written notice personally by mail, fax, or email to each member of the governing body. There's more to this law, but basically there's a process that you didn't follow to change the meeting last week, and you're not supposed to be conducting secret meetings during the school board meeting. But twice during the 8/24 meeting, recess was taken. Recess is not a problem, but huddling away in a hallway for a private meeting amongst board members to have discussion about the public meeting that's already in session is a problem. All of those discussions are to be held in public so that we know what's being discussed. You don't get to make up the rules or laws as you go, even though it seems like that's what's happening these days. It's not how it works. Now, the governor gave some leeway because of COVID, but at that time, you are not allowed to cancel an in-person public meeting, scurry away and hide behind a camera without proper notice just because the meeting is uncomfortable for you. You were not in danger. No one was going to harm you, so stop feigning the victim. I know it's a popular trend at this time. So what's the big deal? Just some procedural problems? Who cares? Well, each board member has agreed to abide by these rules, as such are personally liable when they break them. RCW 42.30120 states that violations of the Open Meetings Act are subject to civil penalties, but do not constitute a crime. RCW 42.30130 states any person may commence an action either by mandamus or injunction for the purpose of stopping violations. So from what I was told, you passed a budget at the last meeting, so that could be technically null and void. You might be liable to some penalties. I'm no attorney, but someone with some law experience might want to look into this. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, who do we have next?
Okay, up next. Let me move this one just a second. Up next, we have Emma Philly. She's bringing her in here. And here she comes.
Hi, guys.
Hello.
So my name is Emma Philly. I'm a registered nurse and a parent of a second grader who's at Lewis and Clark Elementary. I wanted to talk to you guys just about a couple of things. So right now, it seems like there's a lot of parents that are feeling like they're not being heard. And it's leading to a lot of frustration, which is why we're online again, which just sucks, if I'm honest. I really, really enjoyed being able to be in person and to speak to you guys. It's really valuable. So that's a shame. But I think that one of the problems that we're having with these board meetings is that there's no response, right? So I get 3 minutes, I get to say what I want to say, and then I don't get, if I ask a question or something, I don't get any response from you guys, unless it's written in an email from a tin can, right? Like a week later. So that's really frustrating to a lot of parents, is that we don't get to have that back and forth conversation with you guys. And I know that Dr. Gordon, you've been very forthcoming with your time and being able to meet with parents, and I appreciate that. But I think that having a town hall type meeting, maybe once every 3 months, would be really beneficial so that people could have that time for question and answers. Another thing that I wanted to discuss with you guys is that the public comment section, and this has been brought up before, the public comment section is right after the consent agenda. So if you guys discuss something, which is after public comment, right? If you guys discuss something and then move to a vote, I don't get to respond to the discussion that you had until 3 weeks later. And so that's frustrating again. It should, the public comment section should be after the board meeting's discussion. There's oftentimes, like in this board meeting, you guys are discussing the legal technical jargon of your policies. And I'm a nurse, but I'm not a lawyer. And so sometimes I don't understand what you guys are talking about until after you've discussed it thoroughly between you. And then I'd like to have my part to give you guys my opinion. And I think that that's really valuable. So I would request again that one of the board members move to have the public comment section after the discussion. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about is kids and masks. And I know we're running out of time, but my son has been coming home, especially in June when it was really hot, with headaches. He's a rambunctious 8-year-old. He's healthy, and it was really out of character for him. I noticed that he was coming home from headaches with the days that he was in PE indoors. I know it's Wenatchee and we have extreme climates, and sometimes they can't do PE outside. I get that. But if we're going to keep kids in masks, we need to start thinking of some mitigating strategies to give them different activities during PE so that they're not doing high activity in masks. And I'm expecting to see more headaches in December if we don't fix this, you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. Next.
Okay, next up, Brian Higgins, and then we'll come back. Eric, you'll be after Brian if we can bring you in after him. So Brian is coming in here.
Hello there, my name is Brian Higgins. I teach at Wenatchee High School and I live on South Methouse Street. I just wanted to share about some work that we were doing in district today. I think that not a lot of people understand how training days work in our district, and it's important to communicate, especially when those training days are as empowering and electric as it was today. So today our AVID district-wide staff met to discuss aligning some things inside of our district. It was a very electrifying day in that we all left feeling like some major change had been made, and we were very productive and constructive. So I just want to throw a shout out to Brock Hurt, David Vasquez, Alyssa Johnston, Janelle Bailey, Carissa Harley, Tanner Dotzauer, Tina Nickpin Brown, Wilbert Ochoa, and Krista Cacciata from Wenatchee Valley College. We did a ton of work. Hopefully you'll see some product from that work in the next few weeks as we're scheduling our district-wide AVID night, which people are invited to come to learn more about AVID. More AVID parents and students are invited to come to it to show what AVID's all about. And unfortunately, we're missing Orchard Middle School, which I think details kind of an issue that we might all have in district that I don't know if everyone understands, and that is our substitute teacher situation, which is we don't have a lot of subs in our buildings. And so it's hard for teachers to make sure we have those subs for those training days where we actually have a chance to collaborate. I don't know what the solution is besides, offering more money. And I don't know if that's a viable solution or not, but if we can find a way to help our subs feel more valued, or find a way to create or build on the systems we have in district to provide subs and make sure that we have consistent access to subs, then we're going to have consistent access to teachers collaborating effectively with each other and getting work done Within our contract day, we have a ton of time for teaching students, but we don't have a lot of time to do some constructive work to prepare for what's coming ahead. So a lot of the time, us teachers feel like we are behind the gun, not really able to plan for the future, which when we're dealing with this learning gap that we're talking about with COVID, we really need that. So if there's any way or anything we can do to help get more subs in the buildings, and I know we're trying our best, Paul Gordon, I know Dr. Gordon, I know that all of our administrators are trying hard. So I totally understand that. And if there's anything teachers can do to help that situation, I think that a lot of teachers will be very amenable to helping with solutions. So again, thanks a lot to all of our AVID staff, even the ones that couldn't make it. I know those staff members are doing a ton of work, that's really great for kids in their classrooms and in the district. And I hope that you will all be able to see some product from that in the next couple of weeks. I'm really excited to send you some invites. So thank you very much for your hard work, school board members. I know it is thankless and it seems controversial and scary at times. And I hope that as we weather this pandemic, that some of that stress will be reduced. We can continue to make great decisions for all of our students.
Thank you, Brian. Okay, we're going to go back to Eric.
Yeah, we'll try
Nordling.
to bring Eric in here. Eric Nordling, just a second. Eric, there should be a button on your screen to accept the role of panelist, and it'll bring you into the meeting for your comment. Yeah, I'm getting no reply from Eric. He's in the list. I see his name, but he's not replying to come into the meeting. He's not declining either, so he could be having a technical difficulty. I'll try one more time, Eric. Yeah, not sure, and I hope we can reach out and help you out, Eric, with that for next meeting, hopefully, or if you want to write your comment in writing to the board, they'd welcome that over email, and we can help you out for next meeting. But we do have one more that we noticed came in right before the deadline, and it wasn't on my list, but he's in the attendance. So Matt, I'll bring you in. Matt Van Bogart is I think it's our last one tonight.
Thank you.
Unless Eric can send me a chat and get in here.
Yeah, please do try to get Eric if you can.
Yeah, hey, can you hear me, Ron?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, fantastic. My name is Matt Van Bogart. I'll be speaking this evening on behalf of community members that struggle to get answers to some of their questions. So I have 5 questions for the board and the superintendent, as well as 1 comment. First question is, what are the protocols for COVID positive children that cannot attend school? Dr. Gordon said a couple of weeks ago that there would be online options for serving these children. A Canvas email was sent out last week that seemed to contradict that, and the teachers union sent a notice to members that they're not obligated to make online options available for children. So I would love to see a real clean and concise statement from the superintendent and from the school board of exactly what the protocols are going to be at every single school within Wenatchee School District. Number 2, looks like there are about 450 less students this year than last year. What is the plan to scope the budget accordingly and ensure proper allocation of funding that will address the shortfall in impacting the bottom line for the budget for this year? Number 3, when will the district publish a detailed spend plan for the approximately $20 million of COVID/CARES related funding that's been obligated to it over the course of the next couple of years? I know some of the money has been spent up until this point, but I think that there's a lot of detail back behind that. And I know that a lot of us are really concerned about the most at-risk students within our community. So we'd love to see exactly what that looks like in terms of spending that money to accommodate those most at risk. Number 4, when will a detailed plan be shared to address learning loss? 2 weeks ago, we saw a 1-page plan and a video. Mike Lane actually was really kind to reach back out to me via email, and I spent about 45 minutes with him last Friday going over the plan. Seems like there is some good stuff happening in there, but we as parents and community members would love to see the detail of exactly what that looks like. One of the things that Mike and I talked about was looking at opportunities like study halls, looking at additional tutoring, and we really love to see a plan built around that and see exactly what that looks like and how it's going to be implemented. Number 5, when will the detailed training curriculum for DEI training be available for the OSPI? And will the Wenatchee School District, when will the Wenatchee School District take part in that training? Will the training come directly from OSPI, or will Wenatchee School District have an opportunity to modify that training, and will the public have a viewpoint for that? And will we have an opportunity to see it? And last is more of a comment. I'm glad to see that calmer heads prevailed after the knee-jerk reaction to the incident at the volleyball game last week, and the unilateral response by Wenatchee High School principal. From what I understand, some parents were involved in helping bring to a resolution that was both appropriate for the school as well as with the parents. I think this is a great example of how we can work together as a community to solve problems. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to our next item on the agenda, which is a discussion about a property partnership.
Yeah, Laura, thank you. Jeanette and I will take this. In the board packet, you have a letter from the Chelan County Commissioners beginning an exploratory process that begins with the Malaga property and really looking to use that property as they've detailed for those who have seen an area out in the Pasco region where it's somewhat of like a fair going on, but it really is this opportunity to partner with the Chelan County Commissioners for using our property to create a mercado, a Hispanic Latino type of fair where food, clothing, other materials are sold. It has become a really impactful event in other areas. So what they're seeking is to be able to engage with our architect firm, TCF, to review the land, the Malaga land, and then for them to be able to, from our perspective, if there were a school, to make sure our interests are taken into account, but then be able to work with Chelan County Commissioners to lay out what is their vision. It is a flow through. We would pay our architect firm, and then the Chelan County would reimburse us up to $20,000, which is the contract that they would engage with for that TCF architects to do the work. Jeanette, anything else?
No, that pretty well covers it. There's more details in the letter from the commissioners, but really at this point, the commissioners would just like to explore the option of using that property in a shared use capacity, potentially for a short-term or a long-term partnership. And so at this, like Paul said, at this point, it's just, exploring the options and starting to look at some of the logistics to see if that would even work for both parties involved.
Laura, back to you.
Okay. So I guess one thing that comes to my mind right away is liability to the district, and just want to make sure that our insurance company is involved in the conversation so that they can weigh in on our coverages or any shortfalls in coverages that might need to be provided by other parties.
Yes, clear
Yeah.
risk will be involved.
Yeah, I think
definitely.
my questions are, and I know this is just for the bare dollars for feasibility study, which seems reasonable because it's a pass through, but do we have any understanding of either the county's future involvement in this project versus the district's? Or, I mean, I know it's early in the process and we don't really understand, but if we're committing, you know, I don't necessarily want to do a feasibility if our role is going to be expected to be something significant, because it's unclear what the county's role going forward would really foreseeably be, whether they're just using our property and managing everything, or whether it's anticipated that we will have some role in what is going on. It's just a little unclear.
Yeah, I can answer that. So in my conversations with not necessarily the Board of Commissioners, but the person who's doing a lot of the groundwork for the commissioners at the county, I feel like we're both on the same page that this would not be a school district project. Our involvement would be as, you know, landowners, and then we would be leasing that land to them. So obviously, you know, we would have the role of landowners. So if something major were to happen or whatever, we would have an agreement that we would fall back on, which would be very, very, very detailed, as I'm sure you, Julie, being a lawyer, can imagine how detailed this agreement would be. So I think we're both on the same page there, and I didn't get the feeling that they wanted, you know, us to go above and beyond or anything like that. It really is just more of land access and usability. But that would definitely be detailed, very well laid out in the whatever agreement we would come to if this feasibility study came out to be.
Do we
viable.
have any clear, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Do we have any clear timeframes that they're looking for in terms of a minimum time? Because this is obviously a fairly significant financial commitment on their part. So I assume they're going to think that what they would be getting into secures them for a couple years. But what if we decide, hey, we're cash poor, we need to sell this land, we need to build the school? I know those will be written into the agreement, but do we have some foreseeable expectation of what the time frame would be that they're tying up this land if we proceed?
Just in conversations, I would say probably no less than 5 years, but just based on, like you said, like the size of the project and things like that. But we haven't done any discussions on actual terms yet.
The reality is they need to understand the cost implications for the county. They need to start their vetting process. Does this even make sense financially for the county? I think it's a great idea. They've seen some large economic impact in the Pasco area from that Mercata. So it is really an exploratory on their end, but we wanted to use our architect firm and keep our interest in the land at first and foremost.
So my understanding is correctly that the county is going to pay for the architect fees. Okay. So one thing I know that we've learned over time is the school district is not good at being a landlord. And we've been a residential landlord over time, and it's frankly diverted our staff's limited resource and attention away from, school facilities and into, landlord situations, which in some sense, having the county be responsible completely would be a blessing. And it would be nice to see this property utilized for something of community benefit, but probably not with a private entity. So I like the the government to government, the interlocal type agreement with the county and not directly with the nonprofit.
And have they identified this property because the other community property was not, the what was supposed to be the Malaga Park is not sufficient, or is this just better location?
From my understanding, they're looking at ours and maybe one or two other properties. Again, I think it is very exploratory on their behalf of saying what's out there, what makes sense. But I think they have tried to narrow down to a couple of properties. I'm not privy to the other property they're looking at. But I honestly believe they are trying to make sure that they're doing their due diligence, as our board would be doing their due diligence.
And so we haven't necessarily represented anything to them, because what I'm worried about is they're saying, hey, we put $20,000 in thinking that this would be a go if we could just prove it was feasible for some means. So if they just want to go out and spend 20 grand to look at the land and present us with a proposal, as a county taxpayer, I'm kind of like, I hope you have a little bit more expectation than that. But, I just want to make sure that we haven't overrepresented anything, so that they don't come back and say, hey, we spent 20 grand and didn't know you'd only give it to us for a year or had other plans for it. So I'm just making sure that it's totally, they understand it's totally on them. We've not represented anything necessarily.
Yeah, we represented very similar to what Laura just represented. We put a lot of dollars every year into our property that we own that does not have an actual physical building on it. I know it doesn't make a lot of sense to a lot of people, but the maintenance of the weeds, the property, that is a significant undertaking that our district does. And these are not, this property, the Spring Avenue property, those are not small properties, and there is cost involved in making sure the weeds and the soil and everything is taken care of over time. So I totally agree with Laura that from us being owning land and leasing it out to others that aren't a governmental agency, I too agree. I don't think that's really in our best interest, because that's not what we do well. So that's pretty much the extent of the conversation. And quite honestly, I spoke with Commissioner Overbay months and months ago. And then I think they finally, they too have had a lot of issues related to COVID in the world. And this piece has come back up, but there's been no overpromise. There's been no promise of anything other than it makes sense. I like the partnership aspect of it. And any time we can be a partner in helping to drive economic development in our community, I think it's a good piece. And financially for us, if it can cover the cost of the fields and the maintenance, I think there are some win-wins here for us in the community, is how I approached it. But quick and simple, no, there's been no promises made to the Chelan County, to any commissioner or any staff member. Maria, Michelle, or Martin?
I'd like to read a sentence from the letter, which I think takes us back to basics from the county commissioners. The goal of this feasibility study is to determine siting of an infrastructure plan that can be utilized for both the Malaga Mercado and a future Malaga school. That's a pretty clear indication that this is an exploratory study to determine feasibility. All the other points we are talking about downstream are very, very relevant, but they're not directly. And if nobody's made any representations or promises beyond that simple feasibility study, I don't see any issues.
Do we know the cost of a feasibility study? Because they're willing to reimburse up to 20% or 20,000.
It's $20,000. That's the quote we got from the architect.
Okay.
We're limiting to that amount, right?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Personally, I think, I think this is a great partnership. I think it's a benefit for the county, for the city, for the residents of Malaga, as well as the city of Wenatchee. The fact that, so Paul, that's a big site. That's a big property. I've been up there myself. So is that, I mean, how big are we talking? Because you talk about the county taking care of the property and the weed control and all that stuff. Is that going to, I mean, I guess the logistics haven't been worked out. You know, but is that something
From my
to
understanding,
include in the contract, you know, as we move forward?
absolutely, Maria. I think it's a great point. It is a large site that we own out there. My understanding of the Pasco site, it too is very large and it has grown over time. So I have not seen that Pasco site, but by all indications it is a large site as well that allows for parking, allows for pop-ups to be on property, and some access to water and other amenities that will support these types of economic drivers that will ultimately help the community. But it is a large facility that is needed, and that's quite honestly, back to Julie's question, why they're looking at our site is because the size it does matter in this instance.
Yeah, and from my conversations with the county, there's been no concern up to this point. Obviously, we'll know more with the feasibility study, but there's been no concerns about like, okay, we need to make sure when we're doing this that we can fit a school potentially and this market within the footprint that we have, and you know, be able to operate both and you know figure out those logistics. So there's been no concern from their end about you know, needing the whole property or more than half or whatever. That'll obviously be fleshed out through this process, but I don't have any concern about that at this point.
Okay. Do we have any, I know we were renting it for pasture for animals. Is that gone?
Yeah, I don't believe that we're doing that currently, to my knowledge.
I think this is a great partnership. Yeah, it's, you know, Mercado is the market. And I think it will allow our community to, you know, different cultures. Again, it's that inclusivity piece of it. Bring both different cultures together. If the district has you know, can partake in this process, I would support it as long as we're being financially responsible and letting the county manage. And we look at the contract. You know, there's a contract that's very detailed, taking, you know, into consideration the liability and the cost.
Yeah,
I would
I
just
support
go ahead.
Sorry. I'm, you know, yeah, to the extent we need to do something with the land and it's financially beneficial. I mean, the county is obviously a much better partner probably than a private industry. So I have no qualms about that by any means. It was just primarily because they are going to be investing a chunk of money in this feasibility, just making sure that we haven't made any representations because, you know, yeah, it sounds like it could work and that's great, but I just want to make sure that we haven't overpromised anything in the feasibility so they don't come back and say, oh, we spent 20 grand and you had no intention of doing anything. So it sounds like that's not a risk at all. So you know, sounds good. If they're going to pay the cost, have at it.
Well, I just want to say I'm not familiar with the Pasco Mercado, but it sounds really exciting. I think whenever we have the opportunities for economic development in our valley, particularly on the Wenatchee side, I know East Wenatchee has some data banks going in, some other things. So I think it's really exciting that that this is a possibility. And, you know, our land is kind of sitting there being used for pasture or other kind of more passive roles. But I think it's pretty exciting. We're seeing the birth rate trending down. So I don't think we're going to need to build a school there in the next 3 to 5 years, I'm guessing, if not longer. But who knows? Maybe the Mercado will turn it around and we'll start getting increased enrollment and more housing down there. I don't know, but I think it's very exciting. And we'll try not to put the cart before the horse, and we'll just see how the feasibility study turns out. But I'm in full support of this, and I hope we both sides get results that they want to see, and that we can move forward with this, because I think it would be a great use for the property, since it's just not being used much for anything right now. I think a community focused project like that could be really wonderful. So I look forward to hearing more about this at future meetings. Thank you.
Okay, I'll ask Jeanette to reach back out and let them know to move forward. Laura, back to you.
Yeah, so I did want to make one more final comment on that topic, and just to make sure that the district remains focused on its mission, which is education. Economic benefits are wonderful, but we have governmental agencies that are responsible for that. The Port District being one, and the counties and the cities have a role in economic development. The school district does not. So as long as moving forward, we maintain our focus on mission, I'm okay moving forward. Okay, so next item on our agenda, we're all the way down to board communication already. Are there any items that board members wish to share with the rest of us?
So can I just ask some questions, and maybe they're a little bit resonate with some of the public comments we've seen, but I've experienced these firsthand, and I've had a lot of folks reaching out to me. I thought it was great that Mike Lane spoke last week about what the recovery, the academic recovery program was. It obviously needs some tweaking, because I don't think we're at with students in classes and testing. But the big concern now I'm hearing and experiencing is that there is massive discrepancies between COVID protocols between our own schools within the district, and parents are just frustrated and confused. Who has to quarantine, when they have to quarantine, how long they have to quarantine, what are the options when they're out of school? That some are being told Zoom, we previously heard that Zoom was an option, and that's what we had told everyone. And now we're being told, I guess this week, that the teachers aren't allowing Zoom. Whose decision is that? I mean, this affects me, because I had elementary kids that were out quarantining, and because they were elementary, I know Zoom was an option. Now I'm being told that may be off the table if this happens again. At the middle and high school, it's not an option. We have teachers saying, no, we're not giving you any homework until you get back. That's inconsistent to me with our academic recovery program. I think we need some clear and concise guidance quick, because I understand our rates are going down, which is great. Maybe the worst has happened, but to get a different protocol for each school, for each grade is confusing. And I don't know how to respond to this. So I don't know if we have a better answer, a more consistent, what the situation is on that. But that's what I'm hearing the most. That's what I'm most concerned about right now, because it's what we're facing every day.
So we can re-clarify again out to the community, but Zoom is an option, K-12. But again, as we spoke about, it is really working with the teacher and the families and the student to find what is right, what is appropriate for the families. But yes, we can re-clarify those options. We put it out last Friday.
That's what I thought too. And then all of a sudden, what I'm hearing is that some teachers have come back and said, no, we don't have to do it. It's not in our contract to do it. And I can't say I've seen it officially. To be honest, I'm out of the country, so my email access is not as great as I would love it to be. So I don't know what's official communication, but I've heard that a couple times now. And Mike was very clear that yes, Zoom is an option. So I've been telling everyone, yeah, Zoom's an option. But now I'm hearing back, I'm getting constant messages that teachers are telling us Zoom's not an option, and that something official came out and said we don't have to provide Zoom. So I don't even know if you're aware that it's being regarded with that level of aficionado because I haven't personally seen it, but I've heard it a couple times now. And so I am concerned because it just seems to be more inconsistency in what we're doing. And I thought we had been pretty clear and I appreciated that, but it seems like it's not translating down the road.
We'll engage our Teachers Association tomorrow to hear, because you're right. I have not heard that. So I need to sit with somebody and have that conversation. So thank you for bringing that to my attention.
That's all I got.
I guess my understanding also of like quarantine is that, of course, it varies on exposures versus, COVID positive versus vaccinated versus unvaccinated. There's a lot of different things. I would assume that our protocols are similar, from building to building, but I guess in terms of like how the learning happens when one is under quarantine, if it's the whole class, you can Zoom. If it's one student in the class, setting up that Zoom option may not be the best thing for one kid. And I think what Paul referred to earlier is that, parents are having to say, reach out to that child's teacher or teachers to say, well, what's going to work for your kid? And we know that we don't have tech support for every individual teacher, right? So if you've got a number of kids out in the middle school and you've got 6 different classrooms that are going to be covered, you may not be able to have Zoom access for everything. But although we had a year with a lot of Zoom, I'm guessing not every teacher wants to rely on Zoom when they're teaching a class in person for their option for their stay-at-home students. So I don't know, but I would think that it's not the same from building to building, that teachers have some flexibility in that.
If not, then I think that we should have building level, consistency, because inconsistency is very frustrating for people. And we've invested a lot of money in technology and training, even before the last 2 years have gone by. And I would hope that teachers have developed a comfort level that is much higher than it was a year ago. And I'm hoping that most would be receptive to the idea of Zooming in a student, even one student or the whole class. I know it's asking a lot, and I know this has been a stressful time, but I think we need flexibility on the part of our staff.
Yeah, I had not understood the Zoom option. If you were the Zoom student, that the teacher was necessarily expected to do anything above and beyond. They were just, you've got a computer, an option to Zoom in and be that student in class. You may or may not see the teacher dancing in and out, but that's at least you have that ability to participate. And I don't know if there's been some expectation that there's more, or that there's just a reluctance. I know it's a tense teaching environment because of YouTube and all the stuff we've seen. So I would hope that that's not the reluctance that we're seeing, but I can't imagine now how students are catching up if they're told, hey, you're out quarantining because you don't have a positive test, you're unvaccinated, but you were exposed. That to me is what I'm understanding as the longest potential duration that you're out. And if it's running through your family, but you don't actually test positive, I know students that have been out for almost the entire month of September, and some of them have been told, we'll see you when you get back in October. And that to me is not very helpful for our recovery plan for sure, not consistent with what is maybe happening in some areas, and doesn't seem all that equitable if we're, giving students the best opportunities possible. So that's my concern, is just making sure we've got clear messaging, we understand what the issues are, and that we're, to the extent we can, making resources available.
Yep.
So
let me look.
Can I just add to that? So if it's the route, what I heard Paul say, correct me if I'm wrong, is that, we're kind of working with the families on, what the needs are. But then I hear a shift going, Zoom. So last year, a lot of students were provided with additional supports because we knew they were in remote areas and didn't have, Wi-Fi. Some of them don't, obviously we know students we're all one-on-one district, but are we still providing hotspots for those students that don't have, that. So if that's the route we're going to go, 100%, are we providing those supports so that we are being equitable?
We absolutely have that capability and would support any student who was on quarantine who did not have the accessibility to the internet to be able to continue to provide that and step into that space and support that student and that family with that. And I'll make sure that I understand exactly what the Teachers Association is saying, because I'm with you, Julie. I thought we were very clear as to what it is, what it's not. And your description of the Zoom is accurate. It is fairly passive, to be honest, but you have access into the classroom, and sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. So that's that conversation our educators are having with family members, what works, what doesn't. But I will make sure that we're tightening that piece down and hearing from our Teachers Association on any messages that are out there that I'm not aware of. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, are there any other board member comments?
I have a comment that came up. Some elementary families reached out to me with the Pfizer vaccine kind of being on the cusp, potentially being approved for 5 to 12-year-olds. Wondering if our district would be available. I know we were a vaccine site when the teenagers were approved for vaccinations. If there's been any discussion with the health district or Confluence Health or any other organizations about having some vaccine sites at any of our elementary buildings, just because of the familiarity with a lot of families. So I just thought I would bring that up during board communication.
There's been a broad, kind of overarching, hey, are you open to having a vaccine clinic, but not to the point yet of locations or anything along those lines. But I'm, as things continue to progress, I'll make sure the board is aware.
Thank you, Paul.
You're welcome.
Anybody else? So I just wanted to respond, but to get to Julie's point earlier, there have been a number of very specific questions brought up by citizens during our citizen comment period. And I would like to have a conversation with you, Paul, and maybe with our vice president as well, to talk about how we might be able to get some of those answers back, maybe adding a, president's board report or something to the agenda, or some other, sort of streamlined way of, getting some of those questions answered, or maybe it's in the weekly board digest or whatever we call that publication that we put out, so that at least there is some response. We don't want to get a every board meeting being a dialogue between the board and the community. That's not really the way that governance works, and yet we do want that in and out flow of information. So hopefully, Paul, you and I and maybe Martin can discuss that in the next week.
If I could add, I think that would be a great thing to add, maybe certainly for transparency, and because we seem to be getting some of the repeat questions on some issues. I don't love using the board report that we get, because I think that's mostly internal to us. But if you were to debrief, and I'll leave it, Laura, to you and Martin maybe to come up with Paul, but just my thought is I think it's a great idea. And maybe if it starts being something you add to, whether it's your superintendent's report, like kind of a, responses to questions that you've had to touch what you would tell us otherwise in those weekly reports kind of back to the community, so that they don't necessarily need to ask the same questions all the time, but so they know that we've collectively thought about it. I know you're relatively good about responding to emails we get sometimes, but the public doesn't necessarily see those responses. So just a little more transparency in that would be, I think if you could work it in pretty simply, but I'll leave it to you guys to figure it out. But I think it's good.
So there is a different summary. I'm not talking about the one that the superintendent sends to the board. There's a WSD weekly that goes out from Diana Haglin, and it's
Weekly update.
Pardon me.
I think it's a weekly update.
It summarizes, in brief what happened, and it is available to the community.
Yeah, I think, Laura, can you just, it's a lot to cover, but obviously we follow Robert's Rules of Orders. We have to comply to OPMA. I think maybe, given with the citizens' comments, there's just maybe not quite full understanding of what Robert Rules of Orders is, what the how we need to comply to OPMA. And I know we talked about the board norms, like, I don't know, January of 2020 in a board workshop. I keep hearing that, they feel like the community is not being heard. But at the same time, as a board member and knowing OPMA, through board and my work at the college, I think it's just the lack of clarity of the role, our board norms, our communication process for our board, as well as the district. Again, it's a lot of information, but I think somehow we need to get this information out to the public so that, there's a reason why we do the order of our board meetings and our communication.
I think even just clarification that for public comments, that the board does not respond unless it's something specific that's listed in the agenda later on. I think that's a really small point to cover, but it's an important point, because I feel like when people say, well, you're not doing this, or, I want this, or why won't you answer this question? Well, we don't answer those questions in a meeting, because if they're not related to an agenda item, that's how our meetings are run. Now, some public entities locally get into a dialogue after public comments, and I don't think we have that capacity, especially given that we've had numerous public comments. We would be here for hours and hours if we responded to every comment out there. So I do think we need to probably put out some points just of education, just of why the meeting runs the way it does, and why we have the public comments at the beginning, so people don't have to sometimes wait an hour or 2 hours until the public comment later on. So I think it's probably a courtesy that the public comments are at the beginning. Something like that.
I don't hear any part of this discussion being related to answering questions real time. I think we've been pretty clear that we don't necessarily, but I think there have been some pretty important questions raised that we receive numerous questions on via email. So why does somebody get an email response versus any other kind of response? I think it's it's not that Paul's going to respond next meeting to every comment would not be my expectation. And I think we've been clear that is the expectation. And we know under OPMA, you don't necessarily have a right to comment. We offer that opportunity, but I think it benefits our public to hear answers to some important, relevant, important questions. And I've mostly see those summaries as summaries of board meeting things. So as a parent, I don't necessarily maybe pay attention to them as much or expect my question to be answered. So, if it's going to make the meeting run for hours and hours because we're trying to answer every question, I get that. But if there's some big theme questions, I'd be curious to see what we can work in to perhaps be a little bit more responsive to our public that does show up to these meetings, ask questions, and we respond via emails. So if it works because it's relevant to what we're doing, I see no harm. That's what I'm taking for. I'm not suggesting that we start engaging in dialogues at every meeting, and I don't think that was the intent of Laura's question either. So
no. And so Martin and Paul and I will discuss it, and we'll come back with a proposal that either Paul will share with you in the interim time between now and the next meeting, or we'll present it but somehow we will communicate it to you all shortly after the discussion, yet to be scheduled. Okay. Any other board comments before we move into the superintendent's report? Okay.
Oh, one more, sorry.
Yep. Okay.
Since we have my understanding is we've been informed that there's not necessarily a credible threat that remains that is being investigated from law enforcement. What is our position on returning to in-person meetings? And if others are not comfortable, I am willing to sit in an in-person meeting with whoever is comfortable. If we need to follow those protocols we previously discussed, that's fine. If we need to pick the apple bowl so that we don't run into conflicts, absent a COVID reason and absent a present security threat, I would like to try to get back to in-person meetings sooner.
So we discussed that at the last agenda planning meeting this week, and the general nature of the conversation was to take it, one step at a time. I think I am interested also in, I don't want to speak for anybody else, getting back to in-person meetings. The threat was investigated, and so that investigation is concluded. I don't think there's any more that's going to happen with that. So as long as things seem, calm, there's no reason why we couldn't consider resuming in-person meetings. So I think we're going to take that on a,
Maria, did you have something? You looked like you were shaking your head.
Yeah, Laura, you mentioned that the threat was investigated, and that was not my understanding.
That's correct.
Yeah, I believe
that was a mistake. Okay, so the threat was evaluated. How about that? Was evaluated for whether or not I don't remember the exact wording of Chief Crown's letter, but to see if there was a crime that needed to be pursued, or that we could issue a subpoena, I think, or to the Craigslist to provide us with the information about the individual. But there wasn't enough context in the threat to warrant moving forward. So maybe evaluation, the police department evaluated the situation. They didn't go out and identify a person or pursue any charges because of the nature of the communication didn't warrant that level of action. Is that a better way to summarize what occurred?
I think I'll step in for a moment, Laura. I think we were in an area of uncertainty, and I think evaluation might be a better description. There was not a warrant issued. There was no subpoena. And for the, I think, valid reasons that were courteously given to us by the city police department, without using that, they did what they could not proceed any further, did not believe they had the legal grounds to do it. It doesn't mean to say there wasn't a threat. It means to say that it didn't rise to the level of getting a warrant on this occasion. However, that leaves the board not only with a threat, but also with the question as to how people will behave in an in-person board meeting, which is something else that we have to take into consideration. I think most people would very much like to be in person. I believe that This today was very appropriate to be remote as we have been because of the great extent that where we did not know what the situation was. I think meeting by meeting, we should take stock of how we can have an orderly and constructive meeting in person. And if we can do it, then I think we should. But that's a process of checking, which we should begin after this board meeting, I believe, rather than taking stuff in this situation of uncertainty without consulting as to what we're looking at.
Thank you, Martin. You said that beautifully.
So I don't have a problem, reevaluating the situation and, looking at the possibility of meeting in person. However, as a person that was threatened specifically in that post, I would have actually appreciated a conversation, a one-on-one private conversation about this conversation.
Myself as well.
Yeah, it was not something I intended to bring up at this meeting. So since it came out.
You didn't bring it up.
Yep, I know.
Well, I mean, I guess I'm not trying to make anybody uncomfortable or put it on the spot. I'm just asking if this is back on the table necessarily. And I don't know another way without violating OPMA that we could maybe have this conversation, even if it's one-on-one, we start doing a serial meeting. That's why I say, hey, myself speaking, I'm generally in favor of getting back to it if it's something that's on the table, making sure that we are considering that in some way. I'm not asking anyone to have a decision on it necessarily right now. I just want to, A, for me, and B, for the public to know if that's happening anytime soon. So I, don't know a better forum to put it in. So
I would just say, imagine you were in a position of being threatened, yourself and your family, and start with that. That's
and
what
I respect that. And that's why I said anyone who
Thank you.
is not comfortable, I would fully defer to your preference and understanding. I just want to make, are we getting back to public meetings?
Well, we are having a public meeting online.
Well, in person.
In person, yes. And we had intended on being in person, even though a large group showed up and refused a mask, and we went online, and then the threat happened. So we had planned on meeting in person even after that. But I do think that taking threats seriously is important. And I'm not just saying it because I was one of the people threatened, but I think things are getting ridiculous, and it's not just in our area, it's nationwide. And school board members are getting threatened nationwide. And I don't think it's something we should minimize or take lightly.
And there's not one part of my comment that was meant to minimize or take lightly. It was asked after Steve Crown's email that came in with the information that was provided. So that's what brought my question. If folks are not comfortable, I defer to that preference. It was just a question based on that development in this situation.
I want to add one comment too. I said we should take stock and evaluate. It's not a question, I think, of one person or another being comfortable. It's a question of the school board as a representative institution in our democracy being able to function without threats and safety. And that's what needs to be investigated before we go ahead, and we do so knowledgeably, meeting by meeting. I hope that clears the air there.
Yeah, again, for me, the lack of sensitivity to the topic, it just doesn't sit well. To say for those that feel comfortable, again, that's just not being collaborative as a board. I would appreciate, Julie, I'd be more than happy to talk to you one-on-one about this, just like I will with Laura and Martin, Michelle, Paul. But I guess for me, it goes back to the personal. I was personally threatened, and there has been no outreach to see where that level is. So, and I hope you respect that, because you are not in my situation.
No, and I fully 100,000% respect and understand that. And I would be more than happy to outreach. My problem becomes our hands are a little bit tied with open meetings issues. And so I can't have this conversation with all of you speaking the same thing. And, and I'm not necessarily the board president in control. It was meant to sort of be just a question based on this information. Is that within I didn't mean to come across necessarily as, insensitive to the situation. In fact, I thought I was saying, hey, I'm more than willing to have this interface if it's, understanding your situation completely.
You don't.
But it's the fact that we can't have that conversation necessarily one-on-one, as you're suggesting, with multiple of us having it. So
Okay.
my apologies
so-
if it didn't come off appropriate, but that was not how it was meant by any means.
I have a suggestion. We discussed this at the agenda planning meeting, Martin and I and Paul, which was just this Monday. Was it just yesterday? Time flies. Did not have time to reach out individually to Maria and Michelle in particular about how they were feeling, between then and now. So I propose that I would now do that individually between now and the end of the week, that I would have an individual conversation with each of them, Michelle and Maria separately, to evaluate, how each of them are feeling, given that they were named specifically in the threat, and let's try to get some consensus about moving forward. And I'll bring that information back to the superintendent and let him communicate out to the rest of the board. And I hope that that is not a violation of OPMA, since I will talk to each of them individually about their own situation, not about each other or any other board business. And just want the public to know that it seems like we're all trying to be really careful about not creating those violations. So,
Well, I think showing empathy to anyone is not a violation of OPMA. It's not board business. It's just being human.
right. So are you okay? Is everyone okay with that general approach? Yes. Okay. Maria? Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's an afterthought, and not to put anybody specifically on blast, but the fact that it had to come up this way, I think there's got to be some responsibility as well from our board. And like I said, I'm at a different level. Michelle might be at the same level as I am to the sensitivity of it. Again, I'm not open to having face-to-face in-person meetings, not at all. But it was, I guess, the lack of sensitivity, communication, and, to think that there was some that contributed to this, to the how this played out is just disturbing.
Okay, so we will move forward with Laura's suggestion.
And Maria, I'm really sorry if anything that I did or did not do contributed to your feeling that we were insensitive, because that truly was not my intention.
No, I appreciate it. Like I said, I had conversations with Paul about it, about, my concern about the safety of my family. As a matter of fact, I personally reported it myself to the police department with the case and everything. But yeah, I guess I was disappointed of the lack of empathy from my colleagues. I had one person reach out to me, and I appreciate that. So thank you.
Okay. We're going to move on now to superintendent's report.
Just one quick highlight to a group of individuals who sometimes are not highlighted, and that is our transportation team. I had the complete honor to go out to the transportation department this morning with Jeanette Jeffries, and to see the impact of leadership of Jennifer C., Chris Lutkin, and quite honestly, the entire team out there, and the transformation of where that group is at from where they were at a year ago, 7 months ago, is absolutely inspiring to see the team collectively, mechanics, drivers, front office team, all working together to really make a significant difference in the lives of our kids, of picking, for some of our students, many of our students, our bus drivers and our transportation team are the first contact of staff and the last contact of a WSD staff member. But to see how they are all collectively coming together and working together was, like I said earlier, absolutely inspiring. And that is a benefit of that, or recognition of that entire team. I'll highlight the two leaders, Chris and Jen, who have recently been elevated into positions. Chris, he's already been a leader, and we tapped on him to say, continue to support, and Jen stepping up into her position. And just the transformation that has happened in that department is absolutely 100% palpable and real. So I just wanted to highlight the transportation department overall, the mechanics, the drivers, the front office staff, for the work they do each and every day, because many times it's very thankless. They're odd hours, they're long hours, but they are there for our kids each and every day. So just a huge shout out to them. Laura, back to you.
That's really great to hear. Thank you for that, Paul. So now the school board will move into executive session, recess into executive session for a period of 60 minutes to evaluate the qualifications of an applicant for public employment, or to review the performance of a staff member, and to discuss litigation or potential litigation to which the district, the board, or a member acting in an official capacity is or is likely to become party when public knowledge regarding the discussion is likely to result in an adverse legal or financial consequence to the district. Pursuant to District Policy 1410 and RCW 42.30.110, this discussion will be closed to the public. The school board is not expected to take final action following the executive session. Thank you.
Board will take a 5-minute break.
Sure.
See you back at 7:35.
Okay.